In the last video, we defined 3 of our reflections, and there are actually 3 there. That's a separate one from the top reflection. And since then, I've gone ahead and added in what will be the reflection for our the cutouts or cutaways, whatever you want to call them, on the end of the guitar, on the inside of the horns there. All right, so like we talked about in the last video, we're going to start working with what's called a layer mask. And we talked about this little icon, and you can see it's now available. When we talked about it earlier, it wasn't, because we only had our background in the project. But now that we have multiple layers in here and a layer selected, start with our upper reflection, we have this icon available. So with that selected, if I go and just click it, we start to see, we do see so if I just click on that icon, shoot. So if I just click on this icon, we will see a new icon added to our upper reflection layer. Also notice that the paintbrush is now changed to this little icon, which tells us that the mask itself is active. So anything we do now out in our palette will affect the mask. And the way the mask, and not our RGB layer, and the way a mask works is it's similar, well, if not identical, to an alpha channel. You can draw within this mask area, typically with gradients, but you might do some more creative masking depending on what you're going for. You can draw on this, and it uses 256 levels of grayscale data, basically 256 gradations from white to black. White being opaque pixels and black being invisible pixels or transparent pixels. And then anything in between, based on the level of grayscale it's at, varies its level of transparency. So what we're going to do is we're now going to fade our reflections into the top of the guitar. And we will just go ahead and start on the first one. I'm going to make sure my circular, actually my linear gradient tool is selected. And we're going to click in there. You also see the little highlight around that portion of the icon. Shows you the layer mask is active. Again, the paintbrush has changed to this particular icon. Don't know what they call that. So what we can do now with our gradient tool selected is we can go out here and click with the left mouse button and drag. And what that does is, if you look over here, you can see we have white toward the right of the layer mask, which is giving us full opacity, and it trails off in grayscale levels to black. And if I alt-click on this, you can see it in the project window, how intense our white is here, and it trails off to black, giving us total transparency over here. So what that is doing is it's varying the transparency based on that grayscale data of our RGB layer, or our foreground layer. So you can see now that that is kind of trailing off, and that's not perfect, not necessarily what we want. Whoop! Don't want to do that. I actually I drew a gradient with my paintbrush icon and not on the layer mask, so it messed up my RGB layer. So we can come in here and kind of, you know, change our angle till we get the look that we're going for, and that's pretty close to what I want. I want to imply a little bit of turn around there, but I don't want to see the end of that, and that may be about right. I may not get any closer to that. Yeah, that looks pretty good right there. Yeah. All right, we'll just stick with that. Same thing on our other reflections. I'm going to go down here and add a layer mask. It's automatically selected. So with our gradient tool, we're just going to keep working. Now we're on our bottoms thing here, and well, what do you know? I got that pretty good first pop there. That's even better. I'm going to jump back on here. I like the way this is fading off right about there. I'm going to try to get about the same thing going there. And I've got a little bit of implication of that round over there, and trust me, our eye, once we finish this and add gradation to the top of the guitar, your eye will kind of fill in that detail, even though it's not actually there. Going to grab our little swoosh thing here and do the same thing, and just keep popping that gradient till we find a level that we're happy with. That's probably pretty close right there. And then we can go back, and with our transparency we can start to affect the way these look on the top of the guitar and just kind of bring them down. 40 or 50% usually works pretty well, depending on what you're transitioning to. And already you can start to see that our guitar is taking on some shape. It's no longer that flat green, whatever you want to call it. It's no longer that flat platter of color. It's starting to take on some shape. I'm going to go ahead and do something a little different with our cutouts, because I want a little different look here. I'm going to go ahead and add a layer mask, but I'm going to change to my circular gradient tool, and I'm going to switch my colors so that black is my center color. And I'm going to start right here about in the center, and I'm just going to pop this gradient out. You see what I'm going for. I want to work this and maybe just get a little bigger until I start to have almost all transparency here, and just working out to match the opacity here on the corners. And I can probably go a little farther with that still. There we go. And then of course affect its transparency to the point that we want that. Now if I zoom in on this, you can see I'm going to point out some differences here. On one portion of the carve, from here all the way around to the other point, this same point on the upper bout, on the upper bout, we have this landing zone, and that's important. That's a part of, I got it turned on here. Draw that behind it. There we go. That looks better. My binding was in the wrong level. It looked a little weird. We have this landing zone we talked about, which is outside of our reflection but not quite to our binding level. The reflection here, these are actually scooped areas. Let me back out just a little bit. These are scooped areas, and they actually are carved right down to the binding level. There's no landing zone, as we've been calling it, along this binding edge. So we've got a little bit of a problem here. What I'm going to do is go here and select, because I wasn't 100% accurate on where I laid my shape there. I'm going to go ahead and just use the body contour, because I know that's my outside edge of my body. I have control-click that to make that selection. I'm going to zoom back out here and show you something that's really useful. What I want to do with that contour, with those cutout reflections highlighted there, I want to, if I were to hit the delete key at this point, I lose all of my reflection inside here, because currently this selection includes everything inside the little marching ants. So let me undo that. Now if we want to clean up this edge outside of the body contour where our binding is, we can do Control-Shift-I, and that inverts our selection. You can see now that the marching ants are still around the outside of the body, but it's flipped the selection so that the marching ants are also around the entire perimeter of the document. And what that means is that anything that falls within this area is going to be cut away when I hit the delete key. So if I zoom back in on this, I don't know how tight I have to get for you to see it. It's pretty faint. Let me bring the opacity back up of this, and I'm even going to disable my layer mask for a minute so you can really see this. You have some pixels that fall outside of our body line. So now if I hit delete, we just cleaned all that back up, and we have our nice clean binding line again.